What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with a Christmas video. I think this is going to release on Christmas Eve, so I want to say Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, or whatever your denominational leanings are. Happy Holidays to everybody. I hope that everyone has a nice, relaxing holiday with their family. And Santa's little action figure elves just delivered another item to the Action Figure Grader's household. So I wanted to take a look at it and compare it to an item that I just received back from Collector Archive Services maybe a week or two ago. And this is the new item that just arrived. This is the re-release, the 2020 re-release of VC04 Luke Skywalker in his Bespin fatigues. And I thought because I just got this one back from Collector Archive that it might be fun to take a look at the 2010 release. This is the 2010 Ultimate Galactic Hunt foil version of that Luke Skywalker Bespin fatigues. And what's unique about this one is that this is signed by senior Kenner toy designer Jim Swearingen. And I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I have some additional information at the end of this video about Jim. He's a pretty fascinating character, and there's been quite a bit of documentary related information about him that's come out here over the last few years. So I did put together a couple of small segments at the end of this video to give you a little background on Jim. But anyway, let's take a look first at the item that came back from Collector Archive. What a really cool item. And as I've told a few other YouTubers, like Blacked Out Ewoks, I bought this one by accident, ungraded. I have like one of those auction sniping software platforms. And when I see something that I really like, at the time, what I usually do is set up an auto snipe. And it'll bid for me at the last second, my max bid. And then what usually happens is I come to my senses and I remove that bid because I don't want to buy anything. I'm trying to be cheap. But in this case, I forgot to remove the snipe. And so I did end up buying this accidentally. But looking back at it now, for what I paid for it, it was actually a great pickup. I think I paid about 60 bucks for this, ungraded. And I knew it wouldn't score like 90 or 95 or anything, but because it's been kind of handled. And let's go on a tangent here real quick regarding autographed items. I do see a lot of fake autographed items on eBay. So I would encourage those of you who are somewhat into autographed items, which there's probably not many of you, but one quick thing to do is to make sure to just do a quick Google image search of whoever's signature you're looking for and just compare it to past examples. And someone like this, Jim Swearingen, it's very unlikely that someone would like to forge that, but I do see a lot of forgeries for bigger names out there, like Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford. I see a lot of fake autographed items on eBay. So just double check before you buy something, especially if it's expensive. But in this case, this was not that expensive. And I did, for whatever reason, did decide to go ahead and double check the signature. And I found several images on Google of his signature. So I knew it was legitimate. And also Collector Archive had already graded a different item that was signed by Jim. So that made buying this one, although an accident, I felt fine about it because I knew it would authenticate just fine. But this is the foil label, and I think, while it's a great card back, and you got the foil, you got the walking photo, you got the free Boba Fett. This is for the rocket firing Boba Fett. I think the biggest problem that I have with this figure is probably something covered by people that know way more than me about the vintage collection, but his face sculpt is not great. And let's see if we can get a closer image there. There we go. It's not terrible, but I think his face looks a little bit elongated, a little bit kind of Neanderthal. Maybe that's just me. But when you compare it in a second, I'll show you the re-release, and it's a much finer, less wide face, less kind of ape-man looking. And I think it benefits the face print technology that Hasbro used for the re-release really benefited this figure especially. There's not a ton of paint app differences, but in terms of how the figure sits in the blister, obviously there is some differences there. You have the saber there, and the unlit saber as well as the saber in his hand in the original, whereas In the new one, you can see that they've kind of have everything splayed out a little bit differently. And if you look at the face sculpt of the new one, I just feel like it's a lot better. I mean, maybe I'm over analyzing it, but the face looks a little. It's still not perfect. It's still not as good as maybe some of the others I've seen, like VC04 Luke Skywalker. But in general, it's not a bad likeness. It's a much better likeness in my opinion. But this is the re-release. One other interesting, I mean, like I said, there's not a ton of paint app differences between the two. But one interesting note that I found kind of interesting is that the initial release, the boots sit a little bit higher. There's more boot versus if you look at the re-release, it comes down a little further. Maybe that's my optical illusion in my opinion, but to me, it looks like there's quite a bit more boot showing in the original release. But a really cool item signed by Jim Swearingen. I'll go into a little bit more detail on him a little bit later, as I mentioned. But Jim basically designed the 11 of the first 12 figures, as well as a number of vehicles. Really, really cool vehicles like the X-Wing and a few other items. And he played a pretty instrumental part in the vintage Star Wars Kenner line. And he's a pretty central figure, so pretty cool to have. Although it's a modern item, it's pretty cool to have his signature on something to add to my autograph collection. And here is the label on this. It's the 2010 Hasbro Star Wars Luke Bespin fatigue, signed by Jim Swearingen, and it's 85/90/90. Now, I knew that this would not get a 90 because, as does happen quite a bit with autographed items, usually these folks, especially Jim, he goes to a lot of conventions. Usually these items are being signed either in bulk by whoever's autographing, and they're doing private signings of like 300 items. And usually when they do private signings, the items tend to stay in a little bit better condition. Whereas if you go to a convention where there's a line and you got to pay extra money to have somebody sign something, that's where the item tends to get dinged up a little bit more, because whoever's getting it signed, he's got maybe a little bit less control over how the autographer is handling it and sliding it around and kind of bumping it into other things. And also, whoever got the item autographed is carrying that around all day during the convention. So those do tend to get beat up a little bit more than items that are signed at private conventions. But I mean, it still came back with an 85. But I think the reason that held it back is you can see some kind of light edge wear, around the edges. And again, this is probably signed. I don't think Jim is big enough to do private signings, but you can kind of see some edge wear here and there. So, and that's okay. I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm just trying to explain that for anyone who might be looking to buy autographed items, number one, make sure it's legitimate, but just take a look at the condition of it, because sometimes they can get beat up pretty bad. And I've seen some awesome autographed items on eBay, but they're just so manhandled that I'm like, I don't know if I really want it that bad. It would have to be something super rare, I think, if it's pretty beat up. But this is how the back of the card looked on the original, so quite a bit different than the re-release. I think I like the older style cards better. The original VC issue 04 where it shows the first release of the figure, I guess the 31 back Luke with the walking photo. And it's got a few other figures that were released back then in the line. And interestingly, the 3PO and I think this is Han Echo Base, maybe not, but it looks like Han Echo Base versus in the re-release it's Han Bespin. But in this wave again, he's got C3PO along with the Luke in this wave. So it's interesting that there's a couple of overlaps versus the original 10 years ago. And then Vader here. But anyway, Luke was available as part of this wave. It's a fairly recent wave, not very difficult to find. Again, I think that, me personally, I think it's much cooler to have the original first release figure on the back of these original VC cards versus the current wave. It's just a much prettier presentation with the items in the current wave, the original release, versus the items in and around the current wave and a bunch of warning stickers. It's just, much cooler to look at. But in general, that, other than the placement, possibly the legs, the face sculpt, there's very, very slight paint app differences. Like, for example, in the new one, it seems to me like the brown color for the belt, utility belt, and leg strap is a slightly different shade than the darker one. You can see how much darker it is on the original release. So there's some other very slight paint out differences with the little buttons and things like that on the utility belt, but I think I prefer the face sculpt on the new one, but the utility belt and the pants and things like that, and the boots and things like that on the original. But in terms of card back, there's no comparison. I mean, I love having that Boba Fett sticker with the foil racetrack, and obviously there's versions of this without the Boba Fett sticker, without the foil, and I know I've seen a Canadian version of this VC04 original with the error where it says free Baba, Bobba, instead of Boba. So that's an item that tends to be pretty high demand now, with the misspelling of the Boba in Boba Fett. So I've seen a few of those. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you VC experts out there, but I'm pretty sure that the misspelling only happened on Canadian cards. But correct me if I'm wrong on that part. But anyway, I just thought you guys would like to take a look at these. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. I'm going to go ahead and cut it here and show you guys a few interesting bits of information about Jim Swearingen. Hold on one second. For those of you who do not know who Jim Swearingen is, he was basically the senior Kenner toy designer for many of the Star Wars toys. He designed 11 of the first 12 Kenner Star Wars figures, as well as the Death Star playset, the X-Wing, and the TIE Fighter vehicles, and he also came up with the trapdoor feature for the Dewback and Tauntauns. He also designed the very first iteration of the Kenner Boba Fett figure. Before the release of The Empire Strikes Back, Lucasfilm had Jim come on site and get an early look at what Boba Fett was going to look like in The Empire Strikes Back. And based on those meetings, he developed what's called a kit-bashed original concept rocket-firing Boba Fett, as you see on the far right. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term kit-bashed, it really means taking existing figures to create kind of an early prototype sculpt for a new figure. The kit-bashed Boba Fett was primarily composed of the C-3PO torso, the Death Squad commander arms and legs, and then the head of a stormtrooper. And then he used molding clay and other materials to kind of create the first iteration of Boba Fett. To my knowledge, this kit-bashed Boba Fett is lost and has never actually surfaced. So if it ever does surface, I can only imagine what the value of that thing would be. There are some early Star Wars action figure cases that have a paper insert with photos of figures inside the case on the paper insert that do feature this kit-bashed Boba Fett. So you can still find those today, and they'll go for quite a pretty penny. Anyway, Jim is a great guy, and it's really cool to have a signed action figure by him. And I'll include some links in the description to this video to a lot of the source material that you see here. Finally, before we wrap this video up, I wanted to point viewers to two documentaries in case you want to learn more about Jim Swearingen. The first is The Toys That Made Us. This is an episodic series on Netflix that picks a toy line for each episode. And the one on Star Wars premiered in 2017, Season 1, Episode 1. It's about 45 minutes or so, and a really great watch. I feel like the editing was a little bit schizophrenic and hyperactive, but the segments that focused on the Kenner employees and their role in the development of the Kenner toy line of Star Wars was really excellent. I think that the most fascinating aspect of that episode was that Kenner was really the last resort for Lucasfilm and Fox to make a toy line for the movies. Back then, toys based on movies did not do very well in retail, and everyone turned down Lucasfilm and George Lucas for the toy line for Star Wars, except for Kenner. And Kenner had an awesome royalty deal with them where they had to give 2.5 cents to Lucasfilm and 2.5 cents to Fox for every dollar that they made on the toys. And as long as they got a minimum of $10,000 each year, Kenner got to keep that royalty agreement in perpetuity forever. It was really crazy. The negative is that Hasbro/Kenner forgot to make that $10,000 royalty payment one year, so the royalty agreement expired, and they had to renegotiate for the release of the Episode 1 toys. They ended up paying Lucasfilm and Fox almost 19 cents per dollar instead of the 5 cents that they were paying before. So it cost them quite a bit of money forgetting to make that $10,000 royalty payment. And then, of course, I'm sure most of you have already seen Plastic Galaxy, the story of Star Wars toys. This came out in 2014 and runs about an hour and 10 minutes and is also an excellent watch about the making of the Kenner Star Wars line. You can find this one on Amazon Prime. That's all I really have for this episode. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to like and subscribe for future content, and I'll be back soon.